Good afternoon, BookTube. It's Tilly from Tilly's Shelf. I'm not sure if you will even remember me, because I'm just the most unreliable BookTube that ever existed. And I used to be here a long time ago, but somehow I've not been here for a little while. So I thought a good way to kind of restart on the BookTube community would be to do the mid-year book freakout tag. So this is a tag that a lot of people do every year. It's just a good way to recap events, top reads of the year so far, and kind of expectations for the year to come. And yeah, so far this year my reading has fallen into broadly two categories. There's been a lot of kind of detective and mystery fiction, and there's been a lot of books set in the Slavic world, including sort of Slavic inspired fantasy worlds, I suppose, and a couple of odd random ones fitted in throughout there. So I'm thinking of doing some sort of genre specific wrap up videos, but in the meantime I thought I'll just start with the mid-year freakout tag. So that was a very long introduction, so I better get into the questions. I should say nobody tagged me in this, or if they did, I didn't see the video because, like I said, unreliable booktuber, I've been away. So yes, but I will tag some people at the end. So best book of the year so far. So I'm going to say The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. And The Five is a book about the 5 women who were killed by Jack the Ripper. And that is actually something that put me off from reading it when it first came out a couple of years ago, because I thought, you know, I don't really want to make a big deal about these women just because they were killed by Jack the Ripper. That doesn't really seem like it makes sense. But that's something that Rubenhold really goes into, and that's kind of her point with the book is these women had some unifying characteristics which meant that they were in a position where they were vulnerable on the streets of London, which meant that they ended up in the position where they ended up. And instead of saying anything at all about how they died and the way that they died, she sort of looks at why they died and the social history of the time, the social history of these women specifically. She uses information that wouldn't be available for other women who died in maybe slightly more mundane ways, because at the time obviously there was media interest, there were inquests, there were people kind of looking into those women, and therefore we know a bit more about these women than we do about the average sort of London beggar during that time period. One of the things that made this a really enjoyable read for me was I did it as a group read. Can't remember everyone who participated, but I'm pretty sure Amelia reads, Alba, I think Elizabeth from Buchans and Books, Ros from Skalietska about the books because I can't read anything without Ros, and myself, and I think a couple of other people, also a couple who maybe didn't finish as well. But I really enjoyed the process of reading that. It was completely unexpected for me to join that reading. I just kind of happened to join in, and it was unexpected for me to enjoy that book. So yeah, that was best book of the year so far. Best sequel is Penguin Lost by Andrey Kurkov. Andrey Kurkov is a Ukrainian author. Last year, in part of my Stories from Ukraine series, which I have continued even though I've not made the videos, I read his book Death and the Penguin, which is about a journalist who adopts a pet penguin from a failing zoo, and then becomes involved in a job where he's writing articles about the deaths of people who haven't yet died, and then those people start to die. It's a really fascinating book and a very dark, cynical way of getting into kind of the story of Ukraine in that era. I would say actually Penguin Lost is better, which surprised me because sequels are normally not as good as the first book. So at the end of Death and the Penguin, without giving too much away, there is an incident which means that the journalist is separated from the penguin, and this is about when the penguin, the journalist comes back, and he is really determined to try to find the penguin again. And it's utterly fantastic. It goes a lot more into kind of ideas of death and dying than even the first one did, and the first one had a lot of kind of graveyard scenes and things like this. This one literally goes into an illegal crematorium on the front line of the Chechen War. I didn't expect that, but I really got a lot from it, and it's kind of, in a way, I guess, pertinent to conflicts that have continued throughout the eras, but also today. So I'll just read one quote. "Here's to liberating your penguin and the victory of Russian arms," as in Russian weapons. "They clink glasses, and as both sides are using them, there's bound to be." That's the kind of dark humour that you're going to get from Penguin Lost. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. release, or new release that you're most looking forward to, I think it is. Sorry, dog is just a little bit restless. She's settled now. So a new release that I'm most looking forward to reading, I didn't even know about until yesterday. Yesterday I went to an event for the Bradford Literature Festival. The event itself was alright, it wasn't fascinating, but it was alright. And while I was there, they had a bookshop kind of cunningly positioned, so to leave the event you have to kind of walk past all of the books. Us booktubers, we all know how perilous that situation is. I bought 2 books, both of which I'll mention today, and one of them was You Don't Know What War Is by Yeva Skalietska. So I'd say this is my most anticipated new read, in that I started it yesterday and I'm already a third of the way through. And this is a book that comes in the long tradition of war diaries, I suppose. Yeva Skalietska was 12 and she was living in Kharkiv in February last year. Was actually, the war started about a week after her 12th birthday. The first week of her diary is just normal kind of 12-year-old things. And then the bombing starts. This has got a foreword by Mikhael Molpergo. I'm fairly sure, I obviously haven't reached it yet, but I think Yeva has since left Ukraine, which is how she had the opportunity to be able to write and publish this. I really love the cover. I don't know if you can see very well, but it's got sort of sunflowers, traditional symbol of Ukraine, but it's also got missiles kind of falling and planes kind of involved in the sunflowers. So far, I've been kind of surprised by how good the writing is, and I really like that it includes a lot of information about Kharkiv, and also some kind of multimedia, and it's got like text messages that she's exchanged with her friends as well. So I'm really excited to finish this. It came out in 2022, so I'm still classing that as a new release. So, most anticipated release. I don't really read books as they're released. Like, it's quite unusual that I read a very new book. That is a very new one for me. So instead of most anticipated release, I'm going to say most anticipated event, and my most anticipated event is definitely Jane Austen July. It is almost every year, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to read for that. So, you know, it's like a little Jane Austen July TBR in the middle of a mid-year freak out tab. Two videos for the price of one. And I am going to do a kind of Northanger Abbey themed read this year, because Northanger Abbey is the main group read. So obviously that means rereading Northanger Abbey. I'm going to read a modern adaptation of Northanger Abbey, which I think is called The Summer of Secrets. I don't know, I've ordered it. It should be arriving soon. I'm going to be reading this book, British Dandies. So I encountered this at the Ilkley Literature Festival. You're going to be thinking, how did you go to so many literature festivals when you've been out of the country? I don't know, every time I come back there seems to be a literature event going on. I don't know whether there's more than usual at the moment, but anyway, so I went to the Ilkley Literature Festival with Roz from Scally Dandling About the Books, and I picked up this book, British Dandies, and I thought this fits really well with the kind of the fashionable world of Bath, and it talks about sort of the scandalous side of dandyism, I suppose, and the way that dandies sometimes sort of are pushed social and cultural norms, and it's got a lot of fantastic illustrations. It does cover a slightly wider era than Jane Austen's period exactly, but I think it still fits pretty well. I'm also going to read The Monk by Matthew Lewis, or I'm going to try to. I've already read The Mysteries of Udolpho, which is the natural first Jane Austen contemporary that's referenced in that's referenced in Northanger Abbey, but yeah, that one I've already read, so I thought The Monk is the other one that gets a few name checks in the book. I think it's a little bit scandalous, so I'm not sure how I'm going to get along with that, but I'm going to give it a try. I think it's also massive, so I don't know if I'll finish it. We'll find out. Biggest disappointment of the year so far, that has got to be The Trumpet Major by Thomas Hardy. I normally love Thomas Hardy books. I had very high expectations for this one. I'd actually been kind of saving it for a while. By saving it, I mean forgetting to read it, but you know. And I took it with me thinking I would absolutely love it. I was a little bit disappointed. I did do a review video of this, so I won't go into too much detail, but yeah, it was a disappointment because I thought it was going to be great. The biggest surprise for me just recently is that I actually love WB Yeats, the poet. And the reason that this is a surprise to me is because one of his poems was included in the GCSE curriculum. And I think it's one that's called An Irish Airman Foresees His Death, or Predicts His Death, which is told from the perspective of an Irish airman in a plane over the First World War, An Irish Airman Foresees His Death, yeah. And it wasn't the most inspiring poem on the GCSE curriculum. Whether or not that was how it was taught, I didn't really kind of get that much out of it. I thought it was a little bit dull. And then this year so far I've been reading by heart 101 Poems to Remember, collected by Ted Hughes. And for some reason Ted Hughes chose to include a poem called Leader and the Swan by Yeats, which is basically a poem about the incident in which Leda is attacked by Zeus, and I found it a very weird choice to put in a book of poems to remember and learn to say by heart, because it's not really an incident that I particularly want to revisit. But just recently I was in Dublin and I found this little Black Classics edition of A Terrible Beauty is Born. As in, A Terrible Beauty is Born is a quote from one of Yeats's poems, and this is just a collection of some particularly good examples of his poetry. And because I was in Dublin, I thought might as well. And yeah, I found out that I absolutely love his writing. He's got a lot of very, very well crafted lines, very memorable lines that seem to refer to, they just fit really, really well with modern events as well as past events, or they're quite poignant. So I really, yeah, I was very surprised, but I found out that I love Yeats, and I'm definitely going to be rereading this to get a bit more out of the poems as well. Problem with being here is it's actually not very easy to reach that shelf. So next question, favourite new author. I don't think I can be a booktuber who likes classics and is looking forward to Jane Austen July without having my favourite new author be Katie Lumsden, because her book was published this year, The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, and I have a lovely edition. I wasn't able to attend the event because I was out of the country, but I did have a signed edition brought for me by Rosie. And yeah, so favourite new author because, you know, it's just really nice to see this kind of coming finally to fruition. This book has been on a long journey with me already. It's kept me company on a very long train journey, and yeah, it was great to finally get the chance to read it and to enter this kind of gothic world. So yeah, that was my favourite new author. Newest fictional crush is a very weird question because I don't typically have fictional crushes, but I've changed it to newest fictional ship, as in newest fictional relationship that you support and want to do well, and that is going to be Holmes and Watson. So I've got here The Valley of Fear and His Last Bow, which are two of the later Sherlock Holmes stories. Over the last sort of 6 months, well, since November actually, I've been listening to the complete Sherlock Holmes, which is actually incredibly long, narrated by Stephen Fry on audiobook. I think it's actually something like 50 hours and I still haven't reached the end of it. I think I've still got like 8 hours to go, which is the length of a normal book, I think. Oh, I think somebody just got home, so she might want to leave the room. Sorry, just had to pause to let the dog out. So yeah, it's Holmes and Watson. And I thought I'd actually read most of the Sherlock Holmes stories before, but I didn't realise quite how many there were. And one of the things that you really get from starting at the beginning and working your way through to the end is the development of the relationship between Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. And previously I knew that people kind of saw them as having a bit of a, maybe like a bromance, you could say, and that people kind of saw them as like potentially being a bit of a gay couple kind of hidden figure in literature, and I kind of thought that was maybe like wishful thinking, or that it wasn't really there, because most of the ones that I'd read were from the earlier era. What I would say is, as you work your way through this series, you really see how the affection between them builds, and you see them like living together for extended periods, you see them going away and staying in the same room sometimes, you see these references to Holmes like kind of touching Watson, saying my dear Watson, or that's my Watson, and you see like the way that they know each other in this kind of old married couple kind of relationship that they have by the end, and it's sorry, squeaky dog. It's impossible to see them as anything other than romantic, I think, or it's very difficult to see them as anything other than romantic. I think it was thrown by the earlier book. In the earlier stories, Watson has a wife at one point, and then he keeps being kind of distracted by beautiful women. Obviously he's bi, and he didn't realise at the time that his true love was Holmes. But yeah, that's my newest fictional crush / ship. Newest favourite character was actually a really difficult one for me, because I had quite a few rereads this year, and I had quite a few non-fiction reads this year, which ruled out a lot of new favourite characters. only character that really came to mind is actually a very minor character, and that is the character of Yulia in The White Guard by Mikhail Bulgakov. So The White Guard is a book that is set in Kiev, or Kiev as it was at the time, and at the end of the First World War, sort of during the Russian Revolution, at a point where Kiev is kind of at the centre of a few different competing armies that are trying to take control of that space. And even as somebody who's read the history and read the book, I'm still not entirely sure what all those armies like who all those armies were and what they stood for. And I think the confusion of the time is very, very evident in the book itself. It's one that I would recommend. I was advised not to include it in the Stories from Ukraine series because it's of the politics that it that it involves. Although I read it because it's kind of it covers a lot of kind of very it's a very important book about Kiev, even if it's not a book about Ukraine, as it were, because of the situation that there was at the time. So I read that. And Yulia is a character who, she's a very minor character, but her role is very important in that she saves the life of one of the main characters. And she does that after witnessing him being shot in the street by some people from an opposing army. And it's never made completely clear which side Yulia is actually on and what motivates her actions. She says that she thinks this character is brave, but she doesn't necessarily say that she supports his side in the war. And she has a husband who's a soldier, and it's not clear which side her husband's on either. He's kind of absent during the scene, but she saves a life. And I think it's important to see that kind of compassionate role in a story that's mostly about kind of conflict and loss. So yeah, I found her just like such a tiny character, but also potentially such a complex character, so I'm including her as my favourite. I'm taking a long time with these questions, but I'll try to crack on. Favourite book to film adaptation? I'm going to go with The Hobbit by Tolkien, and this is an interesting one because I've seen The Hobbit, the Peter Jackson movies, a few times since they first came out, but I didn't want to watch them again because they're really, really long, but I did want to recapture the story. And it turns out that there are a lot of dedicated fans on the internet who have done edited versions of The Hobbit and brought it down to a reasonable length. So you can actually watch a film of Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Hobbit, having removed all of the random stuff that's not in the book, and you can just watch the story of The Hobbit without all of the sidelines and just, just enjoy it as a story rather than having to sit through kind of like 9 hours of the thing. So I watched one of those with my husband, and that was my best. That was the biggest revelation because it was like an adaptation of a book that I really like. So yeah. Favourite BookTube video that I have made this year? Well, I haven't made many. There's not a lot to choose between, but I think I'm going to go for my review of Index, A History of That by Duncan Dennis. I made it at the start of the year when I still thought I had energy and time. So yeah, amusing to look back on those moments. And that was another surprising book. I never thought that I would get so much enjoyment from a book about indexes. So yeah, so I'm going to go for that one. Most beautiful book that I've acquired this year. Well, actually, I'm bending the rules on this one because I've got 3 examples. So I've got another one from the Ilkley Literature Festival, Home Is Not a Place, by Johnny Pitts and Johnny Pitts and Roger Robinson. And these guys sort of went on a tour of, I think, various parts of England, and the book includes some fantastic photographs. It's got a really nice cover on it. It's got really nice end pages, and it is a signed edition, which I always like. So I think this is a beautiful book. I haven't read it yet, which I definitely should, because then I need to pass it on to Ros. But yeah, that kind of got a high up in my beautiful book acquisitions. But I have 2 others as well, because, I'm greedy. I've got this one. This one is Alisa v Krainy Div, Alice in Wonderland. And if you flip it upside down, you get Alice through the looking glass. And I really like that as a way of arranging this book, which is about things being a bit twisted, a bit unexpected. I thought it fitted really well. Again, it's got really nice end pages, and it has some great illustrations as well. So I thought it was a really great way of presenting a children's book. And this was a present from a colleague, and yeah, I think like my Ukrainian is nowhere near at the level to be able to read it, particularly because Alice in Wonderland, I feel like it's not a good book to read as a beginner in a language because it's got a lot of nonsense in it, and that's going to be a real struggle to deduce. But yeah, I just liked it as an addition. And another one, which I think is beautiful, in like sort of emotionally beautiful as well as physically beautiful, and that is Ukrainian Cuisine and Folk Traditions, which was another gift. I've been very lucky in gifts this year, and this goes through month by month folk traditions. So for instance, one that's relatively soon is we've got St John the Baptist, and you can see it's got these absolutely beautiful photographs, and then it tells you a bit about like the folk tradition of the day, with these like lovely additions of pictures and things, and lovely pictures of the kind of embroidery and stuff that people wear. And then if you go forward a few pages, it tells you all about the things that people typically do on those dates, and then it tells you the recipes that go with the occasions. And I think that's a really nice way of kind of learning about a culture through the popular events. So I think this is a beautiful book by sentiment as well as a beautiful book by presentation, and I'm very lucky to have it. Finally, what do you need to read by the end of the year? And what I need to read, I suppose, or the books that I've committed to reading are the ones that I've mentioned for Jane Austen July. I do normally do at least some Jane Austen July. I mean, actually, Jane Austen July is the event that I commit to the most, and I need to read Afterlives by Abdulrazak Gurnah. I previously read his book Paradise, and I agreed to read with Sean the Bookmaniac. Now I'm doubting channel names, but I have to not doubt. I have to just continue. I agreed with Sean that I would read Afterlives along with him, so we're going to do that as a buddy read, a very casual buddy read over the next sort of month or so. And then I do need to read this book that fell down, The Doctor Will See You Now, by Dr. Amir Khan, which is about being a GP in the NHS. And the reason I need to read it is because I'm not supposed to be buying books at the moment, but like I said, I had to walk through a bookshop to get out of Bradford Literature Festival. Very perilous. Bought 2 books, and I need to read this to justify the fact that I bought it, and I need to read this specifically before I buy any more books, because I can't keep buying books and then not reading them. It's a very, very, very bad habit. So that is my mid-year book freakout tag. It's very nice to be back. I hope there will be some more videos coming over the next sort of month or so, definitely in relation to Jane Austen July. I think there will be. And I'm going to tag some people. So like I said, I've been away for a while, so I'm going to tag some people who also haven't been around up until now. I've done this a couple of times before. This is when I go and watch some BookTube newbie tags, and I try to then tag those people to join in. I think this is a really nice tag to start with if you're a newbie, because by talking about some of the things you've been reading over the last 6 months, you can kind of introduce yourself as a reader and kind of set yourself up in a way that the newbie tag, it's kind of in a similar way to the newbie tag, but it'll pull out some recent reads for you. So I'm gonna tag Trinity Tales. I really liked her newbie video. She mentioned sort of going through a bit of a difficult time period, having what she described half jokingly as an existential crisis, and she's already done a sort of short mini wrap up of the year so far as a short. Shorts are a new thing. Like, wow, like I went away for 6 months and now there's a thing called shorts. Very confusing, and I think this would kind of give the opportunity to go into a bit more depth. Jen, who these are all people who posted their newbie videos in the last 3 days, I should say, so you should be able to find them by toggling if you search. Jen, who talked about loving dragons. I also love dragons, and as a middle school teacher, ensuring that children have access to banned books. So Jen, I would like to see your mid-year book freakout tag. And Anne Rowan, who talked about her love of the classics, and she also mentioned wanting to do a video referring to the books that she read in the year so far, so this is an opportunity for that. So those 3 newbie channels are tagged, and I will try to start getting back into the community and acting like I exist. Who knows how long it will last. Thank you very much for watching if you got this far, and let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books I've mentioned, if you're reading anything for Jane Austen July, things like that. I'm always happy to hear from you. Sometimes I'm not very good at replying to comments, but I am always happy that they're there. Okay, thank you and goodbye.